Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of SBTDT. Today we're going to be talking about something more simple, let's say more relaxed than usual. We're not going to be talking about extreme things, well, depends where you're going to take it. It's a fairly common question. This is probably one of the first questions that everybody asks when they see my bike. What did you do to it? Basically what kind of modifications you've done to it, but we need to make sure we understand what type of modifications you can do to the bike, and also remember that some modifications, they may cause problems to the bike, and even if you want to race, well, some types of races, they don't allow certain modifications. So let's try to distinguish the different things that you can do to the bike and what I suggest to do to a bike rather than something else. Obviously, exhaust air filter, those are the usual things you do right away. It's the thing that personally I do even to my car. It's not a matter of giving more power to your bike or to your car. Changing the exhaust and the air filter is more like freeing the power that the car already has, that the bike already has. The engine is built with a certain power, and then unfortunately, restriction laws for noise emission, they force the manufacturers to put what they're called baffles. They are basically caps inside the exhaust, something that suffocates the bike. The same rule applies to the air filter. Putting a really generous big air filter causes more noise, and that can cause issues with the bike being placed in the market. So manufacturers are forced to suffocate the bike. To put it in a simple manner, imagine that your nose is the air filter of your bike and your mouth is the exhaust. So you do. If you put a sponge in front of your nose, well, that's the air filter. On your mouth, rather than a sponge, it's something that is even more suffocating. Something like maybe a piece of duct tape with just a couple of tiny little holes. So now you're squeezing, you're forcing in and squeezing out. That's what suffocates the motor, and it kills down the power. These are the first thing that basically you have to do on a bike. Personally, like I said, I do even on the car. I like to let my car breathe normally, breathe freely. The same is for the bike. Now, one thing is to remove the baffles, which they are just there to kill the noise. Another thing is to put a full exhaust that changes the size of the exhaust, that takes away the cat converter. At that point, you're going to need to change the chip in the motor, because all of a sudden you're giving much more space to breathe, a much bigger nose and a much bigger mouth. You need to tell your car or your bike how to use it. So at that point, you start having to play with chips, because you just change the filter by putting a different panel. Instead of the cotton, you put one of those nice K&N or BMC filters. Nothing happens. You want to put one of those cooler intake with the mushroom that gets the air much cooler. At that point, you need to start having to change the chip to tell your engine what to do with it. But again, these are just modifications that they free the power that the bike already has. You're not adding power, you're just freeing what's already there. So exhaust air filter, I assume that everybody has already done. So what do you do next? Well, anything else you would do to the bike will add the power to the bike. But is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to spend thousands of dollars in modifying everything else in a motor? You can change the camshaft, you can change the pistons, the rods, you can do all this very happy stuff, but is it really worth it? And how long is it going to last? Because you start playing with the components that are not built to last a long time. And ultimately, if you go to the racetrack to do track days, you won't benefit that much off of it. Let's face it, most of the racetracks that we have here in the United States, it doesn't matter how much power you have on the bike. You can have 80 horsepower as well as 200. When you're down on a curve, we already discussed this in the past, you can only use a little bit of horsepower. It's quite common to see bigger bikes getting overtaken by smaller bikes on the curve. So the best thing to invest on is actually making sure that your bike can handle more power throughout the corners. So first thing would be to do the suspensions. I would invest in suspensions. That's what I've done even with my bike. Now my bike is a Ducati. It already comes with a lot of nice, happy stuff. It already has lightweight wheels. It already has adjustable suspensions, front and back. Really, my bike, the way that I raced it, I changed only the air filter, the exhaust. I put the chip, and let's mention my exhaust is still the stock one. I just emptied it, gutted it, put a nicer filter, changed the chip, and I changed the inserts only inside the front forks. That's all I've done to my bike, and that's how I raced, and that's how I won the championship. I didn't have to do much. Now, I know people that they have other bikes, Japanese bikes, and other bikes from other countries that they're not already pushed as much as Ducati already provides you the bike, and they spend thousands and thousands of dollars in doing this, that, and the other. Guys, let's calm down a moment. It's pointless. Just invest in some nice suspension. A lot of bikes that I see around the streets, they just have the stock suspension. Sometimes they're not even fully adjustable. Invest in those. Change the suspensions, have them changed, get the geometry adjusted for you. Put springs that they are calibrated on your weight. Have the suspension setup done by someone professional, like we discussed last time. When you're at the racetrack, get someone that knows how to work on suspensions, and they will adjust it for your ride style. There is people that likes to brake really late in the corner, so they push down a lot in the forks. And like we said, we need to use the entire fork, so you want the forks to go down but not bottom out. Other people like me, I like to pre-brake and brake a little bit softer but carry more speed into the corner, so my suspensions are obviously softer. Me and my father, we had the same identical bike when we were racing, and we had completely different setups. We had totally different suspensions. Our setup was completely different. Why? I like to pre-brake and brake very lightly and carry speed into the corner. He is the latest braker I've ever seen. I don't even know how he can kick in gears when I'm already starting to brake. But that's his ride style. There is nothing wrong about it. Every person rides differently. But if you have to invest in something, invest in that. You don't need to add power to the bike. The power that your bike already has is more than plenty, especially if you free it up by putting an exhaust and air filter. You already have plenty of what you need. Invest in the handling of the bike. Find a way to utilize as much of that power that you already have throughout the corners. Find a way to carry more speed in the corner. Find out a way to carry more speed out of the corner. Be able to open the throttle before the guy in front of you. Sometimes he's gonna kill it, even if he has 30 horsepower more than you. If you open the throttle a half a second earlier, you're still gonna be in front of him by the end of the straightaway. That's how you win the races, especially in these racetracks we have in the US. In this country, we don't have many racetracks like the international tracks where MotoGP and Formula One goes. We have Circuit of America down in Austin, Texas. That's the only really F1 rated circuit. We have Laguna Seca. Okay, great. And then what? That's it. All the other tracks, there are so many curves, so many tight corners that you cannot really use the power. A MotoGP racetrack, by rule, needs to allow the pilots to keep in at least 50% of the track the bike full throttle. Full throttle 50% of the time. I still haven't been in a track here in the United States that allows me to do that. The only one that I know for sure that allows it are Circuit of America and Laguna Seca. I've never been in any of those. All the other tracks, really, whether you have an 80 horsepower bike or a 200 horsepower bike, you don't have the space to make the difference with the power. So rather than investing in piston rods and all of the heavy stuff that makes the bike even more powerful than what it already is, find a way to utilize all the power you already have. Because really the reality is that when you have already 70, 80 horsepower, you can do pretty kick-ass lap times in most of the racetracks. Look at the lap times. In a lot of racetracks, there are the smaller bikes that have better lap times than the bigger bikes that they have even 80, 100 horsepower. So first, I would do exhaust and air filter for sure, just to do as the first thing, so you free up the power that your bike already has. And considering that a lot of manufacturers are adding exhaust valves to make the bike even more silent at specific RPMs that by law they need to be silent, change the chip too, so you can, that thing gets automatically disabled. That said, the next thing I would do, go with the suspensions, have the suspensions adjusted for your weight and for your ride style. And if you really have to do something, if you have a bike that doesn't already come with lightweight wheels, like the Ducatis already come with forged aluminum wheels, if your bike doesn't have them, that would be something that I would invest to. That's a lot of rotating mass that it's really heavy and really makes a lot of difference in the way that the bike handles. It will make the bike flick left and right much better. And as far as doing other modifications to the bike, unless you want to race in some specific categories that they allow that many modifications, keep in mind that a lot of racing categories, they don't allow you to change more than the exhaust air filter and the chip. So remember this. So make sure you use as much power as you can of the power you already have. See ya!